Welcome back. The United Nations believes the humanitarian crisis in Nigeria has significantly reduced, such that funding for its missions, especially in the northeast, is no longer top priority. In an interview with Channels Television in Maiduguri, the Borno State capital, the outgoing UN resident and humanitarian coordinator for Nigeria, Mr. Matthias Schmil, says the United States is cutting its funding for Nigeria's humanitarian support for 2024 as attention shifts to the war in Ukraine and Gaza.
I would like to say that the funding environment is becoming increasingly challenging globally. You know, humanitarian needs are rising. You know, the latest crisis in Gaza, but Sudan, Ukraine, of course. So the needs at global level are rising around the world, and resources are not rising at the same pace. So we're really struggling in many parts of the world, including here in Nigeria. This year, we asked for $1.3 billion to support the operation here in the Northeast, and we got about 40% of that, 520 million. So that gives you a sense of how challenging it is. Some of our key donors, like the United States, have clearly said that for next year they will give less, up to 40% less. So the funding environment is becoming challenging, and as a result, the main reason I was here this time was to chair our humanitarian country team meeting monthly to finalize our plans for next year. And we are having to become even more focused in terms of our operation. Just simply, we don't have the resources.
Mr. Schmil also commented on what he describes as the waning fight against insurgents in the Northeast. He reiterates the fact that the Nigerian military has made significant progress in curbing insurgency.
I think the next thing to say is that the conflict is evolving. I think we need to recognize that the military has had some significant success against the various factions amongst the insurgents, and my understanding is that they are considerably weaker than they used to be. They cannot sustain campaigns against the military like they could in the past, the insurgents that is. So the sense we have is that the tactics have changed. They are now more focused on random attacks and hitting civilians. And you can see it in the casualty figures that the number of people killed and injured among the military is going down. The number of people killed and injured among civilians is going up. So while the conflict is evolving, some areas across the three states clearly are safer than they used to be, including here Maiduguri, I think is quite a safe place these days. But for many civilians affected by this conflict, it remains a dangerous territory, and for us as humanitarians, it remains dangerous in large parts of the Bay States to move and travel, which is why we'll have to continue to rely on our humanitarian air service, the helicopters, to get to many of the locations where we work.
As for the victims of insurgency, Mr. Schmil says he understands the decision of the Borno State governor to close down refugee camps, which no longer serve some people, while those still in need will be catered to.
Governor Zulum has made it very clear that he intends to continue closing camps, IDP camps. I really understand why he wants to do that. And I think we need to anticipate what that will mean for people. I think it's reasonable that some will be in a better place, but others will not be. And so I hope that we can continue the constructive dialogue we have with Governor Zulum and the other two governors to gradually shift the focus away from lessening from the humanitarian action, so lessening humanitarian dependence on humanitarian towards development work. I think I have said that we have to try and phase down the humanitarian operation over the next 5 years, and at the same time increase our investment as an international community into the Nigerian government on the development side, including work on stabilization and the mass exits.
And finally, we get to hear about his personal experience while in Nigeria.
Well, I think Nigeria, with all its problems, is a fascinating country that is full of incredible people. You know, each time I have been up here in the Northeast, but I've traveled to 16, 17 states in these last 2 years. I've met some, very many vulnerable people, but also many amazing Nigerians that are doing their best. So I would have loved to stay, but all of us working for the UN have time limits, and my leadership wanted me and said this from the beginning: I'm here temporarily until a successor is appointed, and then I will move on to greater things. So I'm sad to leave, because you are right, the work is not finished, not here in the Northeast. And as resident coordinator, of course, I'm responsible for coordinating the development of the work of the United Nations. You know better than I, as Nigerians, there's 130 million plus people affected by multidimensional poverty. So there's a lot to do here and a lot of potential. And my successor will soon be appointed, or he has been appointed, he will soon be announced. And he's a very good man, I can tell you. So I'm handing over into very competent, safe hands.